Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and possibly the middle of the night, wherever you are around the world watching this show. I'm Michael DiMartino, and welcome to another episode of Solutionaries, where we like to look at innovations in solutions regarding various contemporary problems that we're having. And that can range everything from traditional knowledge of indigenous cultures all the way to cutting edge technologies. So I'm really happy to be here today. And just a few weeks ago, I had the privilege to meet our next guest via several people, but through Steve Haggart. And I was really impressed because, there's a lot of people doing things, what we call in the area of full spectrum regenerative design. And that could be anything from arts and culture to governance to economics to renewable energies, technologies, independent media, and health. But today we have someone who is not only doing an amazing project, but kind of bringing together synergistically various areas on his platform. So I want to welcome to the show today. He's in upstate New York, but he's originally from England, Mark Copeland. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time for the call. So looking forward.
Well, I appreciate your time. And what's great is as we merge forward, we have our regenerative media TV platform. And as we go forward, we talk with lots of people who are interested in kind of understanding the big picture and how these potential pieces and players and silos and hoops all eloquently and poetically weave together to help us give the world the solutions that we need and to help architect this new paradigm. So before we get into it, I know your organization is Smart Minds Enterprises, and one of your initiatives is the Earth Ledger.
Yeah,
But
that's
before
correct.
we do that, can you give us a little background about who you are and how did you even get to where you are today and some of your background and interests?
Yeah. Well, if we sort of rewind back to when I was actually living in the UK, I think I left school and I did an apprenticeship in engineering. So this is sort of like the early 90s. And it was it was like multi-skilled engineering, sort of like milling, drilling, turning, jigs, fixtures, sheet metal work, welding, you name it. It was in there. And I used to work for it was a company that was it was like a subsidiary of Coca-Cola in those days. And they made the machines that made all the glass bottles, when it was all glass before plastic appeared. So that was really like the sort of the design and understanding, like problem solving on various levels, mostly at a micro level. And then I sort of realized that the UK wasn't necessarily the best fit for me, let's call it mentally and emotionally. And I sort of got to a place where I really wanted to see what was outside of my hometown. So I started to put together a little bit of a plan to then go traveling. So I think I left around 30 years ago. And I've been on the road ever since, and I've worked across so many different industries, like from hospitality to brokering, finance, internet, web, you name it. I've been involved in it, yachts, diving, like there's lots of areas. And at the core of it, there was a question that really began to emerge from all of the various industries, that like everyone believed that all of the challenges that were in that industry were industry specific, yet the challenges were very similar in its essence of what was showing up. So, ultimately at the core of every society or organization or team is the people. So the culture is really the key to like solving the riddle, and I think that's where the journey started to unfold for me. And I think a big part of my learning was I was in the diving industry for about 10 years, and what the ocean taught me was this very exquisite self-organizing principle of how things really interoperate in such a graceful way. You see it a little bit on the land, when birds flock and things like that, but it's much more visible underwater because everything's moving in those dimensions. So a big part of that journey and the unfoldment of it, not that I knew at the time what I was learning, because when you sort of immerse yourself in that environment, the amount of information that's flowing through you, and you're sort of immersing yourself in nature, literally, you take on all kinds of understanding and knowledge, and to some degree even wisdom, and I feel that that's how this project is kind of like, it's been like a flower that's kind of like little bit by little bit been unfolding. And only just over the last few months, after 10 years of working on this particular piece, is it starting to actually kind of blossom and show its colors, and the tribes are all finding each other. So it's been a really interesting journey to get to this moment. But yeah, I think the myriad of cross section of various industries and cultures around the world in different countries, I think formulated a very unique way of looking at things from not just my perspective, but all of the other people in their belief systems and their ideologies and what they believe, of looking at it through the lens of those individuals, has helped me see a potential way of actually bringing all of these projects together around the world in a harmonized way that we could create a different outcome. So far
Right.
so good.
And I really love what you're saying, because I'm a huge student of what we call biomimicry,
Yeah, yeah,
social permaculture, and natural intelligence. And what I love to do is, we don't have to necessarily architect design things just from our human perception and human reality. Actually, if we look towards nature, that there's a great design of how the interrelationships, and even though Darwin said survival of the strongest, it's actually survival of the most collaborative. And if we look at everything from the mycelial web to a forest system, and the idea of a mother tree, to nature, and we kind of take that in as a template of understanding about these interrelationships. I call it social permaculture when we get to the human element. It's really fascinating because it does expose a lot. So I know you're working with a cross fusion of technologies and platforms, but I really appreciate that you have the human element, the human understanding, which so many times with technologies or various types of things, people leave out the human element, the emotional intelligence, and the spiritual resilience that people are. We are part of the larger ecosystem.
yeah. Totally. I think the interesting thing about this project, it didn't start off as any one specific thing. I started working at the cultural level, with the mindset, the values, the energy of the team, of really cultivating that across the four pillars, like the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual pillars, and understanding what makes that tick. And then there's a body of work that was created by a guy called Richard Barrett, which is called the 7 levels of consciousness. It's a business model that's based on really old Vedic wisdom. Maslow was working around it, and Richard kind of continued that work. So I adopted that model and brought new elements to the picture that weren't necessarily present at the beginning, and that's kind of evolved into like technology, training platforms, seminars, loads of different types of events, retreats, physical workspaces, new standards for professional workspace, restaurants, hotels that remodel, or rather transfigure, the design that we have today, of how you can actually make profit and do the right thing, because the non-profit and for-profit worlds have been separated for so long, and the reintegration of these worlds, of all information, of all religions, and all different sectors of people. I think we've done so much work in division. I think maybe it's time to do some work in unity and bring everyone back to the same table.
Absolutely. And you just kind of flipped the paradigm on its head. We did a small documentary years ago called Profit Over People, and
Yeah.
it related specifically to the work we were doing in the Sacramento River watershed, which is one of the most essential estuaries and watersheds, not only in California because of the agriculture, but really in the world, second only to places like the Nile Delta and others. And what we found is there was a huge disconnect of the idea of making money and capitalism over the effects and the implications of the
Yes.
impact in the environment, the impact on human health, and really a huge disconnect, not only by companies, but even people being advocates and emissaries, and doing advocacy and even activism around some of the atrocities that were happening to them and to our ecosystem, to our watershed and bioregion. Because of these companies were really putting the bottom line first, and stockholders. So again, you've already in the first few minutes of our conversation kind of flipped the paradigm on its head. So yeah, please continue and tell us a little bit. I know you have a lot of things kind of in the hopper, in the quantum furnace, cooking. But
Sure.
I was really fascinated in the time that we had. Tell us a little more about Smart Minds Enterprises, and I was really fascinated when I learned more about, of course, your Earth Ledger project.
So the enterprise, it encompasses like a lot of different projects, like an ecosystem of projects. So if you take any portfolio of assets like around the world, generally the relationship between them is essentially how much money each of the assets make, more or less, right? And if one of the assets isn't performing, they can try and innovate it or cut it loose and replace it, is generally the kind of rule of thumb. So with this approach, what we're doing is like all of the assets share the same vision, mission, resources, money, information, team, etc. And they're all supporting one another to fulfill the greater vision, which is to kind of transform the status quo into a healthier, more fairly distributed version than what we have already. So the ecosystem is like just lots of companies and initiatives and technology platforms that are essentially, they're already out there in the world, but the purpose of them generally is, again, just to kind of make money rather than create change or transformation. So, when we start to play with the configuration of anything, like if you take let's just use software as an example, right? You could take any software. Most of the software today is already made, right? You can go online and you can find software, oceans of software. So the value in software is not the actual software itself, but is the actual configuration of it, right? So the more how can I say, valuable that the configuration that you can create, depending on what your value set is. If it's money, then you can create money, but if it's change, you can create change. So what we've been looking at is like how to configure these different assets, everything from a physical asset to a software, in a way that would essentially better a humankind in a much more exciting, values-based way, rather than the current system, which is like this very, I don't know, I think everyone's like tired of this kind of like rat race of like keeping up with the actual system, of just like keeping us where we are rather than breaking free from it and sort of liberating everyone where we can actually learn how to like live and thrive, as opposed to like just sort of exist, which I think a lot of the world has fallen into over the number of years. So I was looking at like in our world, there's four main verticals, but they really cover everything. You have self-mastery and personal growth. You've got culture and culture transformation. You have frontier technology and sustainability, are really the four main themes. But like as you permeate into those different themes, what you'll find is they start to really deeply interconnect. It's almost like the 6 levels of separation on steroids when you start actually seeing that how much these themes overlap. So the technology network, Earth Ledger, is essentially like the repurposing of current technologies to a new configuration that would allow a decentralized, autonomous community of people to come together to really solve big challenges, like to create all types of vehicles, to create projects, voting, consensus, team members, resources, investing, philanthropy, all in one ecosystem. Was definitely an ambitious project at the beginning, and a lot of people thought that it was too big of an initiative, or a little bit too crazy. But then over time, from year in and year out of like carrying the vision and having a lot of different meetings and events and so on, what's happened is this really beautiful cascade of feedback that has essentially formulated the actual platform, all of the feedback from the community, which is using the collective intelligence in the way that it should be, rather than not listening. And like all of the questions that we answered, we sort of iterated that into the platform before we even considered start building. So we're reaching a point where now, like very much like yourself, there are many groups that have all appeared at the project in the last sort of couple of months. And what's happening is I would look at these as like individual ingredients that would create this very big recipe that we're all chefs of, chiefs of. We're all coming together, and the paradigm shift like is partially a mindset shift, in the fact that, number one, there is another way, right? There is another way to do things. Like we are so conditioned by the system that we think that's the way it is, and that's the way that it's always going to be. So to remove yourself from the system is really the first piece in terms of how can I separate, or how can I decentralize oneself first out of the matrix and out of the old ways of doing things, to be able to then go, actually, there is a healthier way to live. There is a healthier way to interact and to create commerce and to create projects, and like, essentially move back into a place of creation, because I feel like we've been just doing for such a long time.
Well,
There's
it's very interesting too, because I've noticed we had started a Northern California. It was first a resilience hub, and then it became a sustainability hub, and then we made it a regenerative hub. And there's different harmonics of this evolution of resilience. How do we prepare
yes,
for the worst, but plan for the worst, but project and create the best possible
yeah,
incubator for bioregion community, and then of course sustainability. But even since we've known about sustainability here in the West for, let's say, 50, 60 years, but even before that, through a lot of the indigenous cultures, through their traditional ecological knowledge and stewardship of the resources or the ecosystem, let's say. But as we were doing that, and then we encountered the 3 years of shutdown for the pandemic, it actually gave people an opportunity to not to get off, like you said, get out of the matrix, get off the treadmill of consumerism, of
yeah,
ingesting propaganda and kind of being harnessed to this commercialism of trying to keep up with things. And it gave people an opportunity to actually break free and kind of reevaluate. Maybe not everyone did it, but definitely people reevaluated their priorities. And I know for a lot of us, that's when we kind of went into the cocoon or the incubator to start to re-innovate, like, okay, this is the world we're dealing with. How do we become even more relevant and create more connectivity, and what are the solutions that we can focus on? And as we're emerging out of that time of this whole kind of global shutdown and reset, people like yourself and others um, have been really pioneering and working on these platforms that can kind of be birthed into and midwifed, help midwife this and architect and design this whole new paradigm. But yeah, definitely a very exciting time for sure. And again, not just consume, capitalize, monetize, because there's plenty of unhappy billionaires in the world. But how do we do something that's equitable for everyone, but also bring a higher quality of life for ourselves and for the ecosystem? So, and I know
that's
that's some of what you've woven into your Earth Ledger project.
yes, that's the key. I mean, it's sort of like, the resolution of a lot of these goals around the world that we're all working together collectively on. Like a lot of the systems and a lot of the platforms that are out there, they're governed by third-party boards and services, where it makes it very difficult to kind of create a better outcome for everyone that's engaged, like i.e. all of the stakeholders. So the goal is like, the network itself, it doesn't have any ownership, it doesn't have any shareholders or anything like that. So it's very much a stakeholder economy, right? And all the stakeholders, like, they are responsible for the upkeep and the maintenance of the actual platform itself. And it's sort of this self-organizing, self-moderating, self-funding, self-actualizing reality that the world hasn't yet seen before. And it's like allowing a completely different way of commerce and interacting. It's sort of like when you think about like a word just as simple as collaborating, right? Like people don't really know what that word is because no one's doing it, right? And I don't mean no one, but like when I look at the world, I go like, it's very deeply entrenched in competition. Collaborating is a real new idea. Like you name a sport in the world, like pretty much it's all division and sides and competition. It's all about winning. It's all about separation. It's I'm on this side and you're on that side. And you go across any theme of any part of the world and there's division in there, right? So competition is very, even when you get down to the natural order of things, there's competition going on between trees, plants. It's an old thing that's been going on. So there is collaborative nature big time because you've got like things that work in symbiosis, right? There's a lot of symbiosis that goes on in there, but like we don't necessarily pay that much attention to the symbiosis. We're very much entrenched in the competitive aspects of nature. So the biomimicry is like, I think like having a competitive edge is great, but not that being the dominating part of your strategy or approach in the world, because you're just creating massive amounts of separation if that's the key. So what I've enjoyed, even though it's definitely been challenging, is to kind of zoom out, look at the overarching vision and mission, like, and take it really seriously and go, well, how can I embody these values, not into just obviously myself through my behavior and my language and all the things that I'm reflecting out to the world, but how can I embody those values into the technology platforms, the physical assets, all of the various items in our ecosystem, they've deeply embodied the values, because we're like, the team are essentially what's creating all of these assets. So if you can get them to actually live the experience, then that experience then naturally flows into all of the way that you would do things. And that's been a 10-year journey, right? To really get there. And there's still stuff that needs to be like worked out all of the time with those aspects, because we're continuously growing. So what I envision, and what the team have envisioned, and now that more and more people are beginning to see that it's actually possible, is a way for all of the major players in the world that like actually do want to see significant change, that there's a way of actually creating it through this decentralized network, and all the tools, all of the I'm going to say the needs and requirements of each of the individuals coming into the network, regardless of if you are an investor right down to someone who's just voting on a project, or someone who has no access to anything at all, that all of the needs can be met no matter who you are, is a very interesting proposition, I think, for the world right now.
So again, fascinating. So and I know, we've had other times to communicate, and
Yeah,
this is kind of the accelerated course, and we understand a lot of these concepts and terminologies. For people who might be viewing this, maybe they don't have a
sure.
understanding of technology. Can we kind of simplify and break it down of what exactly is Earth Ledger?
Sure.
And we have an idea of kind of its mission, but how does it actually function without necessarily disclosing anything that might
Yeah,
be
that's fine. I'm
sensitive?
more than happy. Yeah. So basically, it's all technology that's out there. So anything from a social network to a marketplace like that's full of goods and services like Amazon. So what we're doing is we're repurposing the technology to purpose, right? To values, to a vision and mission for a greater outcome of the world. And what we do is we remove the shareholders, right? So all of the profits that this network is generating is recycled back through the network. And then the network itself is broken down into five pieces. So you've got a learning management system, right? Where we're going to put a lot of this bespoke content that we've been creating, this very transformative content. And it's across those four themes that I spoke about at the beginning: the self-mastery, culture, frontier tech, and sustainability. There's a plethora of education that we're going to start to put out, and we're going to open up the learning management system so the world can start to kind of upload their green content, the content that's good for the earth. The second phase is basically a collaboration network. So it's a social network for purpose. So purpose media rather than social media as a transition into it. And it's built around what we call the new paradigm initiatives, or in the early days, it was the sustainable development goals. And there's a lot of let's say cloudiness around the background of those goals. So we sort of spent time thinking about, well, if we could create a higher vibrational version of the goals, what would that be? So that, hence the new paradigm initiatives. I'll drop some links to the websites and stuff so you can have a little read. Then you've got the actual funding mechanism, which I mentioned before. So there's a marketplace of goods and services, the learning management system, all of the companies that would be in there globally, because it's an international market, essentially pay commissions. And instead of the commissions going to the shareholders, it goes back to the network to continuously create change. So it's like a self-perpetuating charity. Then you've got various other aspects of the platform that can like allow voting to come online. People can interact with different projects where I'd like to invest or donate various things. Then we have a marketplace of goods and services, very much like an Amazon. So people can populate the various areas with all the stuff that's good for the earth, various technologies, patents, filters, materials. So people can purchase from the marketplace, but a lot of the projects, because there are essentially a couple of logs of challenges and solutions, essentially like a user-generated database of challenges and solutions from around the world, then what we want to do is allow people to kind of use those products and services to fulfill the challenges. So it begins to automate supply chain and optimize supply chain in a way that we've not seen before. So it's like this geolocated marketplaces of goods, services, and projects around the world that would need resolution. And the magic ingredient is always funding, right? So if we give away 100% of the profits from the network, as it begins to grow, more and more of these initiatives are going to start to be fulfilled. So I've been working with a few different groups on these various initiatives. And I think that we found some very unique funding vehicles that we're busy working on setting up structures out in Switzerland. So over the next sort of 2, 3, 4 weeks, many years of work, like a decade of work, is going to start to kind of actualize and come online, and all of these pieces are starting to fit together, including your own, Michael. The timing of us meeting is very much in synchronization with all of the other pieces. So I'm not surprised that this is happening right now at this moment, and it's a very exciting time for us and the project and the people out there. But in summary, it's basically a repurposed social network and marketplace of good, full of things that are good for the earth, full of team members that actually really want to get it done, in a community of people that are willing to spend the time and energy and resource to be able to connect all of these things in a way that creates meaningful change, is probably the best synopsis that I can give.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally get it because it's so interesting. There's so many parallels and threads. Uh, Actually, I'm to the point now, the less I have to do as 101% fully committed
Yes.
innovator, solutionary, and visioneer, the better. And I'm finding right now that actually, as I kind of stand back and look at all the projects and kind of help to become a bridge of connectivity, which is kind of a rare skill set. Sometimes people are so hyper focused on their silo or their project, which is understandable because it takes people to give 100% coherent concentration and cognition on what they're doing.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing now in this landscape, we used to call it networking back in the day, but kind of starting to build bridges between these various solutionaries and different projects initiatives seems to be a really sweet spot, and I'm kind of
Yeah.
enjoying it because um, yeah, the less I have to do, the better. And I'm also to this point in my own life that sometimes we can actually do more by doing less and we don't have to do
Yes.
everything. So really fascinating. I know we're coming up about to the end of our time together. Any
That's all
last
good.
words of wisdom you'd like to share with anyone, or give a
Yeah,
website that
I think now's the time to kind of start looking, reaching out, checking out. I'll give a bunch of links at the end, and really kind of exploring what it is, because I think there's so many opportunities within the ecosystem for people to join the project. There's so many levels within the project that are right across. Like, if you can't find anything in this initiative that interests you, then we're doing something wrong, because
check your
it's
pulse. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, there's an exciting moment, but like, I just want to actually say thank you to all of the people that have gone there and actually done the hard work, because all of the light work that has been going on around the world is actually part of the reason why this has appeared in the way that it's appeared. And to keep the momentum of such an initiative for so long, like, there was definitely moments of touch and go where I was like, is this really going to pay off? And over the last couple of months, like even now, just being up in upstate New York the last couple of days, the amount of fruit that things have bared with barely any contact with anyone, it's really remarkable. So I just wanted to say thank you for taking the opportunity to allow this conversation to unfold, and for everyone out there that's been working on it. And it's now time to get involved. So if there is a contribution of any kind, or a collaborative effort that's in the mix, please do reach out and let's talk.
Fantastic, fantastic. Architects and engineers of the new paradigm assemble. And
Yeah.
it takes more than just ear tickling, I like to say. And that's what a lot of my
Yes.
native people say. And it takes a lot of discernment and vetting. And like you said, kind of rolling up our sleeves and really being innovators. So, again, for a lot of us, exactly what you said, there's this whole wave coming in right now of potentiality, meeting platforms, meeting initiatives, connecting with funding. So we definitely are surging forward.
Yeah.
For those of you watching, I just want to thank you for tuning in. We try to keep these interviews in depth, but also short. We know you have a busy life with lots to do, and we also can tend to suffer with media with attention deficit. So I
Sure.
want to thank Mark Copeland from Smart Minds Enterprises and Earth Ledger for taking some time with us today, and really appreciate. And I look forward to our meeting in just about a week when we start to bring
Yeah.
some of the solutionary lions and platforms together to see what we can all kind of collaborate and co-create together. So again, thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you. Yeah, appreciate it. And I look forward to that meeting. Actually, that's a pivotal time.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. Have a great day, Mark.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. Take care. Ciao.